Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival. We're getting towards the end of our third week, only one more week to go. Today we've got an open mic session provided to you by Innoverne. It's back to the future, but not in the film sense, but rather a look at collaborative and circular commerce. We've got some really great speakers today, and I know they're really interested also to have your input in the discussion. There's really two main ways in which you can contribute to that. The first is by the Google Hangout chat function, which is what you'll see it on the right-hand side of your screen or in the bottom left-hand corner of your video, and that's where you can submit questions, which I know we'll have some time to address at least some of. If you don't have a Google account, you may need to use Twitter, which is via the ThinkDiff hashtag. So just put the ThinkDiff hashtag on whatever question you have, and I'll also feed them through to the team. But without any further ado, I'm going to pass over to Chris Hoskin, who will be leading this session. So thank you, Chris, and thank you to all of our panelists for being with us today.
Thanks very much, Seb, and thanks for putting on a great festival and giving us this platform to talk about both circular and collaborative commerce. I think, first of all, I should introduce the panel. We're joined by four thought leaders in the space with regards to both collaborative and circular commerce. First of all, I'm delighted to welcome Jamie Burdett. Jamie co-runs McCann Pioneers. They're both an innovation and a sustainability practice within McCann World Group. And Jamie also sits on the board of a business called Worn Again, which is developing a closed-loop textiles technology business. We're also joined by Christophe Bousmart. Christophe is the Sustainable Development Project Manager at Nespresso. His entire career has been immersed in innovation. He has to his name over 20 product patents, new business model development, all around sustainability, and his perspective is really about driving better social and environmental performance right now at Nestle. Eva Carlson joins us from Houdini Sportswear, where she's the CEO. Houdini is a great company. They're not a big company, but they certainly aim to be the best company in sports apparel. Their products are known as addictive by their customers. It's a small business that is innovating at a rapid pace. So they introduced Houdini Recycle in 2007. 65% of their products are cradle-to-cradle products, and to extend product lifetime even further and exploring resource efficiency, they've launched Houdini Repairs, Houdini Reuse, and Rental. And just this year they opened possibly the world's first sustainable store. And finally, my boss, I'm delighted to welcome Julian Thomas. Julian is both the founder and CEO of Innoverne, who are the sponsor of this particular session. Julian really is a technology and circular economy pioneer. Our platform helps large brands design, develop and implement closed-loop systems, circular commerce, rental solutions, yield optimization and returns management. So a great panel, and on to the session. Essentially, a new breed of commerce pioneer is emerging. They avoid linear business models. They retain ownership of their products, and in many ways they act as a service provider. They provide access to those products or services as opposed to selling that product in the normal sense. And some of those companies are establishing very efficient take-back systems that are disruptive in and of themselves. Some of the business models in this space are lease, hire, rental, which are not new concepts. So we're asking the question, and I'll perhaps start with you, Jamie. Are we simply on a journey back to the future of commerce with some of these circular and collaborative commerce solutions that we're seeing today?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of going, as you say, backwards and forwards. So Back to the Future's nice. I think I had a look before we came on air, and the oldest reference that I could find to leasing was from 2010 BC in Egypt, where they used to lease plows to the farmers because the farmers couldn't afford them. So kind of leasing isn't really a new thing. And I think as we progress through the recent history in neoliberal economics and the rise of the consumer, credits become available. So people have been able to buy expensive products which normally would have been leased in our history, perhaps my grandparents, and certainly my mum's. I remember kind of like buying TVs and stuff through radio rentals. So this isn't a new thing. The thing that's new, I think, is two areas. One is the value of resources. So instead of you owning the product, like the Houdini clothes, or certainly the clothes that we're trying to do with Worn Again and some of the companies that we're working with at McCann, they're now looking at, well, we will own the resources. The resources will actually stay on our balance sheet as a business, and then the consumers will have the product as a service. And the transactional capacity that the computer in everybody's hand has introduced makes those service models very simple. So for me, it's a combination of the value of services, all sorts of new technologies, and using a really old model in a very, very new way.
Thanks, Jamie. Christoph, would you like to add something to that? Maybe talking about product as a service or services as a service? You may be on mute, Christoph.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
In case of the product I am working for, so a coffee experience, what we are looking at is really to deliver the right coffee experience to the consumer, or the one he is expecting. And for this, it doesn't need any material thing or to own anything. What he just wants is the pleasure to have a cup of coffee. So we are trying now to really move things so that he just has to enjoy and don't care about anything. And it's why this concept of circular economy is very interesting for us, because we think that to avoid the consumer to be bothered by any, I don't know, I would say breakdown of a coffee machine or recycled capsule or whatever, he just need the pleasure, and he just want the pleasure. So we are really looking at different options of new business model to delivering this coffee experience without having the troubles of the issue of whatever technical breakdown or whatever.
Great, thanks. It's interesting, we're talking about similar business models in a different time, and what's definitely changed since the times in Egypt is technology. So, Julian, perhaps you can talk about technology as an enabler for change. Is that what's been the game changer, or is there something else?
I think that it's a really interesting question, Chris. There's no doubt that technology is an enabler. But I don't think it's the be-all and end-all of being able to operate or run a circular business. I think it can help an organization transition much more smoothly from linear to circular. But you very quickly come up against organizational issues as well. So in particular, we find that the organization as a whole has to understand the financial implications of moving to circular, and that takes time to take on board, and it needs buy-in, at a very senior level. Mm-hmm. And then once an organization needs to start to actually execute circular, if it's coming from a linear model, functions today that might solely be involved in outbound distribution or product management have very different functions and roles to perform in a circular organization than a linear one. And so it really gets down into organizational change and changing the way people work, changing the way people think, reorganizing the fundamental processes of the business over time so that they can execute circular effectively. Because otherwise there's a risk that it's just paying lip service to something that might need to go out and back. And I think that's, there's so far that technology can go to pin all of that together for an organization, but if it's not driven top down and if it's not actually really taken on board by people, technology won't necessarily solve the problem by itself.
Julian, what are some of the key challenges that the technology is embracing? Clearly, a traditional linear commerce model is geared around promotion and selling a product, but I'm assuming in a circular model that product's coming back, right? So which technology modules or capabilities are required?
So I think if we look at a traditional linear business, it's all about a buy-in, pick, pack, ship, and dispatch. So you really hope that nothing ever comes back. And if it does, it invariably sits in a large warehouse going nowhere. If you look at the fundamentals of a circular model, you expect everything to come back. So returns is the norm, and you have to focus your organization around being able to know what's out, know when it's coming back, and be able to take it back rapidly, refurbish, replenish, and I'm sure as Eva will testify from her side of things, being able to repurpose that product and recommission it and put it back out again. And that's something that a traditional commerce operation really doesn't focus on, really can't do. So it's all about the rate at which you can accelerate returns, and it's all about giving consumers and your business customers a very different way to buy or consume or pay for use of something.
Perfect, thank you. Maybe Eva and Christoph, we can use your organisations as a way of illustrating how the challenge to embrace collaborative and circular commerce is different in a large business, a business the scale of a Nestle or a Nespresso. And Eva, your business, which I assume is very nimble and can change very, very rapidly. So are there differences? Is there an ideal set of conditions to be able to embrace collaborative commerce? Eva, maybe you can go first.
Yes. Well, I think in an entrepreneurial business setup or a startup, the innovation that's part of the DNA of the company. The way we work every day, so maybe it's easier for us that way to both bring in new type of solutions, new ideas. But then, of course, I would say the tough thing for a small company is having the enough resources to make the innovation and the new solutions happening.
Sure.
A larger organization might. I've heard about tendencies, larger corporations trying to build a new setup so that they can have innovative, creative, disruptive cells within the company or very closely linked to the company so that they can have these great ideas and new solutions and finance it easier than us.
Sure. Christoph?
I tend to agree, but on the other side, I think that both companies have different issues, I would say, or different challenges, and that's right. What I would say, a startup or whatever, they are coming with a new mindset, and they are very open to news. And if they want to choose from one business model to another, there's less things to do than for a big company, where when you just change from a linear model to a circular model, you have to change, I would say, the SAP system and all these things. And you can imagine that this is not done from a day to another. So I think we both, and when I say we, it's a small company and a big company, we both have challenges. I really think that we as a big company need to change the mindset, our mindset, and to understand what will happen or what is happening or what will happen in the future, and to be able to change from a business model that is very 2 centuries now working in a linear model. Just the answer is always, but we are doing like this since years, so why should we change? And it's more or less always the answer I receive from people, and not only from my company, from many other companies. So the question is, we really have to adapt ourselves to what is new, what are the new trends, what are the new consumption models, and all these things. And it's I would say, for me, it's quite difficult, let's say, because, as I said, we are doing it like this since 25 years, and we are still successful. So why we should change?
Sure.
So it's really, for me, the biggest issue. While in a small company, I can understand it's easier, but on the other side, you have less resources, and you are already working 20 hours a day to already fulfill the current business. So you don't maybe have time to spend on looking and changing things and all things. So that's different challenges, I would say.
Thank you. We've had our first question come in for Twitter, and it's probably a good time to address it. So, Jamie, this one's coming at you. Would anyone on the panel be able to tell us what's different about new usage over ownership models compared with the past?
I think it's really to do with the word ownership. You don't own something. So if you're leasing a circular economy product, you're basically using the resources that are embedded in that product for the experience of that product. So if it's a coffee machine, it provides you with coffee. If it's clothing, it provides you with warmth or fashion. But the resources inside that, the textiles or the resources in the actual coffee machine, don't belong to you. They go back into the system at the end of life through reuse or refurbishment. So I'd say that the main thing is about ownership. It's a different form of ownership and a different form of a financial and transaction. So I think the biggest leap that we at Warn Again are kind of pushing towards, and it's our main focus for the last 8 years, is ultimately what happens when you rent clothing. So you have cards that are $100 a year or whatever the economics work out, and you buy the clothing, you use it, you experience fashion. If it's fast fashion, you experience warmth and robustness if you're going up a mountain, but actually the materials are then returned into the circular system to be re-looped, and then obviously that's where you don't get the impact on virgin resources.
Thanks, Jamie. We had this.
Maybe can I add something?
Go ahead, go for it, Christoph.
I would say, let's say, I would like to use an example that I'm always using is what I would like at home. I don't want a printer at home. What I want is photocopies, and I want printed paper. So I would like to have a business model where I am paying 10 cents per print, but not owning the printer, not owning the cartridges and all these things. So I just pay for the use, 10 cents per print. So HP will invoice me at the end of the month for 50 pages, €5, and that's all. And they just care about, they have to care about that the printer is working well, but the cartridges are still full of ink and all these things. And I don't have to bother about anything else than just having good quality of prints. That's how I see the new business models, this non-ownership business model.
Thanks, Christoph. And I think there lies the challenge, I guess, with a large organization that by its very nature is organized around net profits and unit sales in the traditional sense. And so you have the challenge of I think Jamie's used the phrase in the past, linear, almost bumping into circular within an organization. Let's move on to the next question. It sounds like similar to a large IT project of the past or business change programs that we have today, that education plays a key role. Stakeholder buy-in from the top of the organization, is that true of collaborative commerce and circular commerce? Julian, perhaps you can tackle that.
Well, I'll certainly start us off. We look at things from a very commercial perspective. So in order to get anyone to actually buy into the idea of circular, we really find that the first part of what we're doing is highly educational. So we're taking a message out to a linear business that may have no comprehension of the term circular or what is really meant by circular economics, and we are educating our audience and our potential customers and the people in those organizations that there are aspects of what they're doing today that are in fact circular in some form or nature. So we talk about the business models, we talk about changes to revenue, we talk about changes to inventory and input costs, and we talk about increased margin and the way in which a recurring revenue model drives up shareholder value. But we're not talking about circular, because if we go into a business and we say, hey, we're going to do circular, everyone goes, don't get that, that's really too difficult to understand. So the education really comes, delivers the message of circular actually as a byproduct of talking about real business practices and things that make money today. And we find that if we put it into that kind of language and that context, people understand it a lot faster and are much more accepting of it. And then at the end, there's a kind of ta-da moment where you can say, by the way, what you're doing is actually circular. And they go, oh, we didn't realize. So there's, it's definitely an element of education, but education coaxed in the voice of commerce and the language of commerce, rather than education coaxed in the language of sustainability and the environment.
Excellent. Jamie, will you come in here? I guess you know, with your McCann hat on and your innovation and sustainability practice, you must be facing this education kind of issue a lot.
Yeah, I think it's one of the sort of side projects that I'm working on. Is that, you know, there needs to be a simplification of the complexity of the messages around circular. I think Ellen and the foundation have done an amazing job in getting this off the ground and getting the focus on it. But actually, it is quite a complex issue, and you can translate it into the commercial terms. But also, I think, you know, you don't want to totally lose the sustainability message, because that's really important. So I think at times human beings are really good at sitting in committees and understanding concepts and talking about them, and they're a little bit sometimes, you know, they hold back in terms of actually moving forward into practical solutions. So the real breakthrough for me is finding real examples where this has actually worked and turning those into stories. Because the thing that resonates most with human beings is stories. You know, I'm in the advertising business with my other hat on. That's what we do. We tell stories, and we have to connect those stories with emotions. And at the moment, the circular economy is an incredibly cold concept. So we have to find the emotional humanity within it. And at that point, I think people will start to fall in love with it.
Perfect. Ava, I'd love for you to tell us the Houdini story. So you've got cradle-to-cradle products. You're innovating with a sustainable store. You have Houdini repairs, reuse, and rental. Tell us your story. You're innovating rapidly. Tell us what you're working on and the success.
Yes, well, considering we're talking about education also, I just wanted to bring up the difficulties we have in terms of getting those worn-out products back.
Okay.
It's something we have a change of behavior that everybody has to do. Old textiles, what do you do with them when they're worn out? It doesn't come back to us that easily. I think we have to educate the end consumer about the actual benefits and how big a difference it is if they can recycle or they can be recycled. Because we clearly don't get back enough. There's too much out there staying at home and not being used or being thrown out with the normal garbage. That's of today. And one other thing I think that has to do with education is still I think there are many people who are, when you talk about circular or sustainable, they feel it's contradictory to doing good business. And to us, it's completely the opposite. We're doing great business and growing because of our circular business model.
Yeah.
And that's also still very new to many people, I think.
Yeah. Tell us about your sustainable store and what you're trying to achieve there. I'm just wondering, your picture is dark on the screen as well, Ava. I'm wondering if
I don't know. It didn't used to be.
No problem.
A while ago, and I didn't put off the light.
No problem. Well, look, crack on. Tell us about the sustainable store and what you're trying to achieve there. I guess this is in the within the context of being an omni-channel brand, both kind of online and offline as well. So you've got it all going on.
And thus we are working with quite new concepts, such as rental, which is completely unknown within the outdoor industry, at least.
Yeah.
It's really important for us to have a platform where we can meet people as a retail shop to bring across these new ways of doing business or new ways of relating and communicating and providing services to our end users. Because this is not possible right now with our other dealers, the retailers out there. So we're doing it with our own platform, and hopefully we will, and we are already seeing that we are inspiring our retailers to maybe start one or two or three of these concepts. So when we started the store, I think the traditional way of opening a brand store is just communicating and selling as much as you can. But we, on the other hand, want to become a part of the local environment and how do you do that? It's not about just selling a lot of stuff. It's about embracing the local community and neighbors and making sure that you have a setup which is more, I think it's more humane in a way, the way we work.
Yeah.
They can come back to us with, we can help them fix their gear, repair, but we can also help them wash and care for their gear if they're uncertain about things like that. So it's new for us as well, really. So we're innovating every day to make it work better and find new ways of sharing and sharing both inspiration and knowledge.
Sure, thanks, Eva. And Christoph, you have your boutiques as well, so you kind of showcase your products in boutiques. I assume the boutiques are central to your sustainability challenges and the way that you deliver both a collaborative experience with your brand, but also a kind of circular experience with regards to resources.
Yeah, what we are doing, let's say, in our boutique is that we are putting in place some options for the consumer to bring back their capsules, for example, and then we are communicating them, and we are, let's say, pushing them to bring back their used capsules to be recycled, so that we can recycle the aluminium and valorize the coffee ground. So we are let's say, pushing for that. But that's right, that education of consumers is not something easy, because at the end, of course, you still want to sell product, and we are not here to sell recycling, but we are here to sell products. So and consumers are coming to buy a product and not to buy recycling when they are coming in our stores. So it's not easy to tell them that they can recycle, and we don't want to, of course, to force them to recycle. It's at the end, it's up to the consumer to do it. And as Eva is saying, things are staying at home, and you keep it for years in your cupboard, and then at the end, after 10 years, you're just saying, oh, I'm throwing it away, while it should have been used to be recycled into a new jacket or whatever. So education of consumers is something quite difficult, I would say. But on the other side, we are helped by, let's say, all the things that are communicated today about these things, climate change and so on. So some people are starting to really be proactive in this sense, and coming to us and say, what can I do? How can I recycle my capsule and all these things? So which things, but things are changing. Young generation are asking more and more questions, and they are wondering why they should choose our brand and not another brand. And part of their decision is made on the sustainability aspect of the brand. So this means that this is changing, and this is a trend that we have to take.
Thanks, Christoph. I think this topic of do we wait for consumers to drive demand for new business models around kind of hiring and renting and leasing and effectively using as opposed to owning products? Do we wait for that consumer kind of change to happen, or do we drive that change ourselves? Is a really interesting topic where I guess the clout of a large company versus the clout for a startup, they have very different challenges. Jamie, maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, it's kind of the elephant in the room. It's very interesting when you talk to big brands about this. The question of, do consumers care enough yet? The research that we've done certainly is a little bit depressing on that front, but I think that's possibly a generational thing with where the money is at the moment. But the money is going to change. So your famous millennials that are here to save us are coming in slowly in terms of the consumer markets. They do have a wider aspect and a deeper aspect for sustainability. For me, it's a sort of little bit of push and pull. At the moment, for the next 15 years, we're not going to have a consumer pull for this. So it's going to have to come from pioneering companies who basically beta test new ideas and prove that the model exists both internally to companies and externally to consumers in new ways. And we're seeing that with various kind of service options, like from simple things like shavers. The shaving market now has, I think, 3 main companies that produce shaving services where they send you the shaver through the post and all the rest of that stuff. So that's also creating a competition, and suddenly that becomes the norm. And then, that sort of builds up and builds up and builds up. So for me, at the moment, it's really hard, but I just don't think they care enough. So I think it's going to have to come from the other places. And the final point would be, you use the example of kind of small brands and big brands. So we have two here today. Actually, both of them want the closed loop economy to exist. So I think the other elephant in the room is collaboration. And it's small, it's big, it's across supply chains. We're not seeing enough collaboration yet around big questions about how we shift industries. So I'd like to see more collaboration, and I'd love the consumers to care more, but it's our job to probably make them care.
Thanks, Jamie.
I think that let's say I am like Jamie. I think the business have to find the right solution to answer the needs of the consumers. And if you are going back 30 years earlier, when Nespresso was not existing, what the consumer wanted is not a coffee in a capsules. They just wanted a good coffee at home, a coffee like they have in a bar, good taste and so on. And they didn't want at this time a coffee in capsules. And Nespresso came with the solution, let's say, to deliver what they want. And today I think we have to use the same model to say what they want is don't have any issues, do not have any challenges, do not have to take care about stuff that are at the end of life. They just want good coffee. They just want a good jacket at the right time, good fashion, good color at the right time. They just want that. So we, as a business, we have to find a solution to deliver their needs.
Thanks, Christophe. I think I'm hesitating whether to introduce this concept between kind of B2C, so I think we're probably aware of some of the examples out there where marketplaces are being used to connect consumers to facilitate a collaboration and an exchange of some kind. But Julian, with Innoverne and B2B, we're not seeing a 10-15 year lapse of adoption, and I'm intrigued to why B2B is suddenly gaining speed and momentum in this notion of circular and particularly closed loop.
Yeah, I think I think there's a marked difference between the B2C and the B2B spaces. So we talked earlier. Jamie mentioned this. Does the innovative business put something to the consumer and into the marketplace for the consumer to choose to adopt it, or does the consumer come to the brand? Well, in reality, the consumer never comes to the brand. It's always the innovators who've taken product to market that have succeeded. What we find in the business-to-business environment is that the runway for businesses to continue to just try and sell more as the only means of driving shareholder value and growth is, they're realizing that actually the runway is running out and it is just fundamentally unsustainable to continue to do that. So they're much more open to looking at ways that drive margin and drive shareholder value. And if that means that they can make less and they can lower their input cost and lower their inventory cost, and they've got a way to monetize products that they make today and the products that they'll make in the future in a very different way, actually they're quite open. I think that one of the most valuable elements of a circular business model, and it really doesn't matter which one it is, whether it's product as a service or rental or some kind of long-term use of rather than ownership. If it drives recurring revenue, then recurring revenue is between 8 and 10 times, or sometimes even 15 times more valuable in terms of shareholder value and share price than a linear model of trading. And that's really the big economic driver here, is that circular releases shareholder value that is completely unobtainable in a linear model.
Thanks, Julian. Jamie, I can see you nodding away there.
Yeah. I think I was nodding because I'm in agreement, and then the other bit of my head's going. It comes back to, I think, one of the previous points around education, and you can take sort of these figures sometimes to the boards of companies outside of the innovation departments or the impassioned sustainability departments, and show them that they'll get recurring, revenue rates. Not necessarily in your clients' cases, but certainly the stories I've heard, and they'll still look at you as if you're mad. because they don't. It's such a new model. They cannot literally move their heads and say why would we adopt this entirely new system? I'm going to have to change my procurement process. I'm going to have to completely redesign my supply chain. You know, I don't care about your more money. I'll just stick with what I've got, thanks, and just trash the planet in the meantime. So I think it's still a really hard job. I think no one should underestimate how long we have to go in terms of creating a circular economy. Although the positive side is what we've got used to as a culture, and certainly it's happening a little bit more in businesses, is things change at a ridiculous pace now. So between years and things can happen very, very fast. And I've said it before, but I do think the moment we see a big company adopting circular, communicating it properly with a genuine case study, and it proves it with real money, this thing will just, it'll fly. But we still, unless anybody else has one, I can't think of a big brand with a big play doing circular yet.
Yeah, I think I don't know, Christoph. Sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, because we were talking about B2C and B2B, and of course in B2B environment it seems, I won't say obvious, but it's easier. But if you are thinking now in a B2C environment, and I don't know how it's happening in the other countries, but in France, for example, your TV box or your internet box you have at home, it's not something you are owning. You are just paying €3 per month, and you I would say you just rent it. And if it's broken or whatever, you just call and in the cities you receive a new one, because what they want you to have is access to internet, access to the TV, and so on. So, and they are not selling it as a circular model. While I know that the one I received last month, because mine was broken, was not a new one. It was just a refurbished one. And so this means that they have, from scratch, I think, and I was not there, but I think from scratch they have decided that this setup box was going into a circular model, even if at this time I don't think that they were thinking circular, but it was really the model that I was explaining about the printer, or of what could happen with a coffee machine, I would say.
Thanks, Christoph. Julian, go ahead.
Yeah, I think So I think one of the questions that was raised was, why is adoption easier in a business-to-business environment than potentially in a business-to-consumer one? And I think this comes down to a couple of fairly fundamental aspects. First is in a purely collaborative consumer model, it's quite difficult to monetize the transaction between two consumers. There's very little in the way of a regulatory framework or a normal operating model. And you see people like Airbnb now starting to put in place basic ground rules, even stemming from the auction world, etc. In the business-to-business environment, there are well-established trading relationships between organizations and mechanisms by which things can be monetized. And I think one of the key enablers in B2B is that it's possible to pass a share of the revenue from a collaborative or a closed-loop model back through the supply chain. And the minute you can pass revenue back through the supply chain, actually you can drive interest across the supply chain, and people are actually prepared to do something about it. There's one other thing, which is that businesses don't like volatility. And if you look at what happened between 2009 and 2011, when share prices hit the floor, trading hit the floor, there simply wasn't sales to drive any kind of profit or sustained revenue within a business. Actually, I think that was a big trigger point. In fact, I think it was a watershed moment, because people at a senior level in an organization are prepared to come along and go, actually, if this is a model that's going to protect us from another big downside in the future, then actually we are quite interested, because we don't want to hit that kind of crash of 2009 to 2011 again. So I think there's a much greater propensity to adopt a recurring type model within business now, because people don't want to hit the floor again.
Thanks, Julian. Ava, I'm really keen to get your feedback on this. I know sometimes larger organizations, they will almost talk a different language, and you guys are so agile and so nimble. What's your perspective on this?
Well, I'm sitting here thinking that it's a bit of a luxury situation we're in, because we can build the right way from the start instead of trying to reform or reshape into circular. But we have a big challenge, and that's moving the whole sourcing and the manufacturing and transportation cycle, which is in the outdoor industry taking at least 8 to 12 months. And we source maybe a fabric from Japan because they're the only ones in the world that can make it. And then we manufacture in Europe. And this whole model is extremely slow in the way it works.
Yeah.
With everything happening around us, even we can feel like we're a big corporation because of this, because we are involved with the big players, and we are in a global market. So it's not easy to be that fast in moving, even for us sometimes.
Yeah. So we almost have a race. We have a traditional supply and demand world, if you like, and we almost have a race towards collaborative competitiveness. I think that's a phrase that you've used in the past, Eva. Do you think that's fair? Are the companies and brands that win, are they going to be the organizations that are able to collaborate more effectively than their competitors?
Yes, absolutely. I don't think you could manage. I don't think you're going to be in business if you don't start collaborating in new ways, both vertically and horizontally. Yeah.
Super. Jamie?
Yeah, it's the holy grail for me, the collaboration thing, and I think there are two phases. There's sort of a pre-competitive space where you come together to solve industry issues, and then through a collaborative platforms, the competitive space is then just how good are you as a business using, within that industry. And I think there's a friend of mine from IDEO, he tells me this great story about the Japanese car industry way back in the sort of 50s and 60s, and they nailed an awful lot when the Japanese car industry was growing. Aside from gearboxes, and none of them could do a gearbox. And in a very Japanese way, they all got together into a kuritsu, I believe it's called, and sat down and put their innovators together to create the best gearbox they could. And the sum of the parts, without, excuse the pun, of those innovators created an amazing gearbox, and then everybody had access to it. Now, they all made different cars with different brands and within different businesses, but they used the same gearbox because that was the secret sauce in the middle that made them competitive. So that's the same thing for industries around closed loop, around aluminium, or around textiles, which is an area I'm working in. And Eva's absolutely right. But there could be a model in the future where you have territory-based, localized production, recycling, remanufacture, and everything else. And at that stage, if it was up to me, I'd chuck a little bit of social enterprise in there as well, so people got paid properly. And then you're kind of looking at a transformation of real economics and real business. And at some point, hopefully, that will connect with these, magic millennials, and they'll demand it at the same time as these shifts happen, and then you've got a real change, a real shift.
That's great. Thanks, Jamie. Julian, anything to add on collaborative competitiveness being the holy grail and the kind of barometer for brand and product success?
I think it's essential, certainly for small and medium-sized businesses, to be prepared to partner and collaborate with much larger organizations that may today exist only in a linear model, in order to either help them accelerate towards circular, or to open up a scale and a marketplace that wouldn't be accessible to a business with more limited resources. And I think that that picks up very much on Eva's point. There is only a certain amount that a small to medium-sized enterprise can achieve with the resources that it has available to it. And either it's going to have to partner with other organizations of a similar size, if you like, behind the scene, upstream from the downstream marketplace, or it has to be prepared to collaborate with a much bigger business. And that means you might end up with a much smaller share in percentage terms of something that's worth an awful lot more. And that's always a challenge. Strategically, that's a challenge for any medium-sized business.
Thank you. I'm conscious we have about 15 minutes left, and we want to get to some questions. Just to repeat Seb's message at the beginning of this live stream, If you have a Google account, you can ask your questions directly via the Q&A panel within this Google Hangout. You can also use the ThinkDiff hashtag on Twitter. Take some more questions, certainly in the last 5-10 minutes of this. I just want to revisit one question first, and this is around Jamie. I think you mentioned you can't think of a big brand that is doing this today, and it began to make me think about case studies. So Julian, you mentioned Airbnb. Where are the case studies? Why can't we name a big brand that is doing this successfully? Why is that? What's the problem? What's stopping us? Do we not have the conditions for this to thrive? What's happening? Go.
Is that to me or to Jamie?
Go for it, Jamie.
Oh, you were. I was going to be to Julian. You start, Julian, and then I'll join in because I've already had my little piece on that.
So look, I think we've touched on a number of topics, and I think we might find the root cause in some of those. It takes time to educate an organization. It takes time for an organization to understand what circular means, to work its way through different business models, and to then execute something to the point at which it can come to the market. I think we are seeing major brands do this now in the business-to-business space, but that doesn't necessarily mean that consumers get to hear about it, because it's just a change in the nature of a trading operation within a supply chain. But there may ultimately be some form of consumer benefit, but it's not a direct communication into the consumer space. So you have major vehicle manufacturers are they're very much behind car sharing. They're very much behind new ways of consuming vehicles. You've got people moving equipment into service networks that is very different to the way in which it's done in the past. Where the models are being completely disintermediated. Where people are accessing what they need when they need it instead of having to buy stuff that they wouldn't necessarily use. But these are not consumer plays, and so they're not coming out into the consumer environment in a way in which the household would recognize that this is a big brand doing a consumer product. But also that's a great way for a business to play with and pilot and trial something in a business-to-business space, because it doesn't necessarily want to take something out into the consumer world until it's sure it's going to work. And I think that's where brands like Houdini and some of the initiatives that Christoph and the team are pushing together, at Nestlé and Nespresso, there you'll see the small to medium-sized businesses that are driving the message into the consumer space, and you now start to see the big brands following through. They just take longer to get there.
Yeah, and I think for me, maybe that sounded a little bit doom and gloom if there are no big case studies. There are lots of very positive stories within the circular system, but I don't think anybody's put a system together where from end to end, taking into consideration all of their resources through to all of their products via a service model. That hasn't been done yet, and it's probably not been done yet because this is a brand new way of thinking systemically. The human business, well, business in humanity, don't really think in systems. We don't think in systems as governments. We don't actually think in systems as local councils or even communities quite often. So that's a kind of different way of thinking. So, I mean, I kind of support what Julian's just said. In pockets, there's some fantastic stories. The car industry is going gangbusters on this. It's great. Some of the other companies are doing it as well, and the smaller companies are coming up, and there's some really good B2B collaborative platforms starting to shape up. But the point I think I was making about not having the full circular economy case study yet is the one where it all takes off, where you do it full end-to-end. Yeah.
Perfect. Christoph, your perspective on that?
I think what I was saying about this set-top box or the internet box, I think it's just because we are not selling circular economy as a concept. It's just we are some companies are already doing it without selling it as this concept. They are just doing it because it makes business sense, and it's what really each company has to find is that it makes business sense for them. And now I think that we really have to either be proactive, either to wait the consumer to ask and not to ask, but to be willing to do something like that, to integrate this kind of concept now. And it will take time. It will take 10, 15 years to be the common way of making business, I would say, or to change from a linear model to a circular model. But I won't say that nobody is doing it. Maybe there are other examples than this setup box or this internet box, and I'm sure that if now they would make a study on this, on what is the, let's say, the circularity of their system, they will perform quite well, and without, let's say, selling it to a consumer. And what we have end up at the end within the company is that it's not something we are going to sell. We are just going to sell another way of having a relation with our consumers. It's just what we are going to sell, and to offer them new services that they are expecting, or maybe not even expecting, but they just have is in the back of their head, not even thinking of this, but when it will come to them, it will say, oh yes, but why we are not doing it since many years? We should have done it earlier. So I think it will take time, and what I wanted also to come back is on this new technologies. I think this new technology and the fact that we are connected 24 hours a day, this will help a lot, because this will help to the reverse logistic. This will help to reduce cost of the logistic and all these things. On the other side, what I think also is that we maybe have to work with politics so that we are moving from labor tax on labor and to move it to tax on materials, because today the issue with this kind of business models that I have seen is that labor is too expensive in our countries, let's say, and it's what is making it's putting some brakes on development of this concept.
Thank you. Seb, I'm not too sure if you can hear us, if you're able to pick up some questions from #ThinkDiff, that would be very useful. I'm unable to see those questions at the moment.
I can hear you. We've got questions, quite a few questions come in via the Google Hangout Q&A function.
Okay.
Do we want to go through those?
Yes, please. Let's go and look. So the first question, the model of uses would seem to be well suited to urban environments where access and mobility can be optimized. Would the panel give their views on how this transfers to rural areas? Where's our gamely volunteer there, Julian? I'm gonna drop you in it.
I'm not sure that's the best thing to have done, actually, so I'm not sure I can answer it. Is it best suited to urban environments? Access and mobility optimized? Well, is it all about access and mobility, or is it being able to receive something and being able to send it back in order to be able to benefit from it? So, obviously, rural environments, and communities are potentially more cut off, but they're not entirely cut off. They don't exist anywhere in most of the developed world, certainly, without some form of distribution and return model in place. So, should they be cut off? No. Is it common sense that major brands or programs, initiatives are going to try and get into a marketplace where there's the highest potential number of consumers or users of a circular model? Yes, I would have thought they would. So you're always going to see a mobile phone operator launch 4G in a major metropolitan area, and it is always going to have a tail, I think, out into the countryside. I don't think circular needs to work like that. I think a brand can get its goods out of services into the rural environment, used where they need to be used, and sent back into another cycle and another loop. So I don't actually necessarily see a big differentiator between urban and rural in that respect.
Thanks, Julian. There's almost a follow-on question which I'll also direct to you, if that's okay, with regards to lease models, rental models, loan models, product as a service models with regards to trust. So where the renter effectively becomes the owner temporarily, and the currency of trust in that relationship. How do companies that are engaging in circular commerce ensure that that trust is there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is really where the role of the brand comes in, and I'm sure Jamie's going to want to pick up on this, and I'm sure Christoph and Eva will also have something to say. But you know, there are lots of small businesses providing a rental model today. You know, everyone knows you can go and rent pretty much anything you like in terms of power tools or equipment, etc. You'll often get something that's a bit ropey. You know, you don't really. Actually, it probably has been maintained, but I wouldn't have said necessarily it's always maintained and delivered in perfect condition. I think for a brand to engage in circular, it has to understand that, you know, every touch point for that product with its consumer marketplace needs to reflect the brand, and so the integrity with which circular is brought to market must encapsulate everything around the way in which, you know, that product or those items or those services carry the absolute integrity of the brand all the way through. So just because something has been used before doesn't mean it shouldn't be delivered flawlessly. And it's also then a responsibility of the brand to, you know, if it's going to be manufacturing less and sucking less resource out of the planet, and it's going to be operating effectively a circular fleet rather than a linear inventory, you know, it's going to be putting more design and more product development and better quality materials into that core component and that core product, and that has to be reflected all the way through.
Thanks, Julian. Eva, a question that was directed to you with regards to community groups. I think you talked about the Houdini brand in your store and the local community. Have you worked with any repair cafes to make the link between the aspirations that you have as a brand and making those repairs happen?
Well, it's a really great idea. We've so far worked more on repairs in terms of physical and mental repairs, but with providing yoga classes and exercise classes, like going out running, but not repair shops, or repair cafes. But we've been looking at it.
Seb, do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, go on.
Thanks very much. So this is how important, what is the role of small businesses and innovators in the development of these new business models? I think we've touched on that, but Jamie, maybe you can take that one.
Absolutely vital. I would say that because I own one. But I also sit on a panel, very lucky to sit on a panel with NASA and Nike, which is called Launch. And every year we have a bunch of innovations that go through a process, and we end up spending 3 days with these guys who are inventing like wild and wacky bioplastics and all the rest of it. And our job is to try and help them understand how they can get to market by connecting them to big brand clients who might become customers, or helping with their marketing personally for me, or some financial structure. And I think in this space, the people who come up with the breakthrough ideas, the guys who are sort of mad enough to have the chinks of light, and crazy enough to kind of put their 20 hours a day in, and I'm sure Eva can tell you about her story of 20 hours a day to get Houdini off the ground, because that's exactly what everybody has to do in those spaces, is they're the ones who can kind of create opportunities for the big boys to then utilize. So for me, but they need encouragement, they need support, they need financial backing, they need bigger structures than we currently have. So yes, they're absolutely vital, but I think they need some more support around them so that they can really be the best that they can be.
Thanks, Jamie. I think we're right up against our deadline. I'd like to thank Christoph from Nestlé Nespresso, Eva from Houdini Sportswear, Jamie, who is with Worn Again and with McCann Pioneers, and Julian from Innoverne. It's been Innoverne's absolute pleasure to put this session on, and thank you, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, for giving us the platform as part of this DIF festival to talk, to collaborate, to share ideas, and to hopefully drive both circular commerce and collaborative commerce forwards. Thanks very much.
And thank you very much to Chris for chairing that session, to all the panelists. It's been a really good, interesting and informative discussion. Thanks to the viewers who also contributed with their questions. To our viewers, I just want to signpost a couple of sessions very quickly. Right now, starting at 3 o'clock, we've got Sir Ken Robinson speaking on inspiring a generation, so education innovation. For those who aren't familiar with Sir Ken, he's one of the leading thinkers on education, and he's definitely speaker not to miss if you can catch that one. And then next week we have our sort of grand finale on Wednesday the 12th of November with 4 leading innovators. We've got Janine Benyas and Michael Paulin speaking on biomimicry at 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and then 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock we've got Rachel Botsman and David Rowan speaking on emerging technologies. So that's another set of sessions that will bring the Disruptive Innovation Festival pretty much to a close, although there are 2 more days of jam-packed sessions after that. One more final thank you to Chris and to the rest of the panel. Thank you very much for your time and also for your contribution to the Disruptive Innovation Festival, and thank you all for attending. We've got 1 more week and 1 more day to go, so please keep catching the Disruptive Innovation Festival, and it should be also noted that we've got an archive section for sort of must-see sessions, and I think that this session will be appearing as a part of that, so do catch up on any sessions that you've missed. Thank you all.